Hello there, it is yours truly, only on PlayStation VR 2. So, as I promised, there's going to be another video, and that's what this is, that second video from GamingBolt, right? Get a bolt of gaming now. Now, GamingBolt, it's a big channel. They have 1.2 million subscribers, so a lot of people watch this, and a lot of people are, valuing the opinion of GamingBolt. So you expect people to obviously participate in conversation about what they have to say and their opinions. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go ahead and dissect this video and give you my honest opinion on what I think about this video that they made. And the video I'm talking about, obviously, it's none other than this one. Why Sony made a mistake focusing on PlayStation VR 2 instead of a new next generation handheld. So I'm going to give you my opinions. I will commentate as we're watching this video. I will give you my commentary, and I will give you my reply on what they're saying, and I will commentate on what they're saying. So on what this individual is saying. So let me just read the description as to what this description says here really quick, and then we're going to watch the video. As we watch the video, I will pause. First, we're going to watch the first 2 minutes, 3 minutes, what the person is saying, and then we're going to pause, and then I'm going to commentate on that, It's like a picture-in-picture commentary, We're going to watch the video, and then I'm going to commentate. All right, so this was published on February 6, 2023. I just cannot wrap my head around this. What was this decision making? I mean, I know what it was. It was wrong. Is what it is what it was. But watch it, play it out in real time, flabbergasting. Sony has decided to split their resources, and they are going with the VR market over the portable one. I appreciate VR, and I really do hope the kinks that prevent it from catching on are worked out sooner than later so that the format can hit its full potential. But at this point, it is abundantly clear that for the broader market, VR holds less appeal. It is an answer to question no one is asking, to split your resources for that versus portables, where the financial and strategic advantages would be immense in comparison and taken on their own as well. It's just mind-boggling. I wish the PlayStation VR well, but in the here and now, if you were to ask me about this entire sequence of decisions and events, I would say this represents some of the poorest decision-making ever by Sony in their entire history in the gaming market. Some pretty critical, harsh words, and you thought I was bad on criticizing Sony for their cheap plastic. I had a legitimate criticism there. But this guy clearly has some sort of a bias against the VR. That's my first impression by reading this, because he loves Handheld, and he enjoys Handheld clearly. And I think even the video he talks about, Steam Deck and success of Steam Deck, and even success of Nintendo Switch OLED to a certain degree. And of course, Sony, as we all know, jump-started this whole, portable gaming with more console graphic type of console graphics in a small, compact handheld device called PlayStation Portable, PSP, back in 2004, and PSP was very successful. I think they sold around like 80 million units. That was pretty successful for a portable, very first Sony portable device to sell that many units, So I understand where this guy is coming from, but at the same time, I also see a certain bias against the VR. So right there, I can see that there's a certain bias against VR on this, on what this guy is saying. And I think this is one of the main reasons why he's getting 426 dislikes and then 558 likes. It's very divided, as you can see, looking at this ratio. It's very divided. That's because you have, on one hand, individuals who are hardcore Sony fans, and on the other side, you got individuals who are maybe coming from a PC camp or from a handheld device camp, and just regular Joes and Marys who maybe see his perspective, you know. So anyway, let's watch the video and then I'm gonna commentate. So sorry that I had to read this for you, but I just want to give perspective here before I start the video. So let's watch the video in full screen and let's listen to what he has to say.
The PlayStation VR 2 is set to launch in under a month at this point. In a few weeks, a brand new Sony platform will be out, and while there is some enthusiasm for the platform, especially given the great hardware it's packing, as well as renewed hope that Sony might help make VR mainstream, there is a curiously muted sense of hype around the new headset. Almost as if, outside of the already converted VR enthusiasts, the rest of the industry doesn't quite care.
Well, I don't know about that, if they don't care. My problem with the way this guy introduced this video is the entire video starts off by some sort of a bias against Sony and the decision that they went ahead to make PlayStation VR 2. So right here in first 36 seconds, it's starting off on a, in my opinion, a wrong foot. It's like a biased foot. And I think that's something that every journalist should avoid. It's starting off on a biased. That's why we're in such a great divide, even when it comes to politics and all our social issues, etc., etc. And you're starting off with a bias. It's never a correct approach, in my opinion. So let's continue.
On some level, this does make sense. In spite of the general certainty around VR being the next great tech paradigm for not just video games, but computing as a whole, remember, Facebook rebranded itself into a VR-oriented company at the height of its powers and prominence, and even companies like Apple were looking into investing in the format. It just never quite caught traction the way you might expect.
Okay, fair enough point. Sure, it didn't get enough attraction as maybe what they were hoping for in terms of reaching that global objective, right? But it's still here. VR is still here. It still exists. Unlike 3D TV, it's totally gone. You know, you can't find anything regarding 3D. They don't even have cinemas in 3D anymore. So, to this regard to what he said, I understand his point that it didn't reach the global objective to get a lot of people into the VR to make it a standard, right? But it's still here, and it's still growing, and it's still evolving. When you look at the Facebook and Oculus Quest and this Meta, they sold, I don't know how many units. I don't have the exact number of units, but I'll just go on a limb and I'll say that they sold about 50 million units, or maybe more. Okay. I'm just going to go on a limb. All right. Let's say they sold 50 million units for the Oculus Quest 2. That's still pretty good. Maybe not what they are hoping to achieve, but it's still pretty good. That shows me that there's still people out there yearning for the VR experience. And 50 million, and I guess I'm just guessing. I don't have the, please go easy on me. I don't have a statistics sheet on me. If it's 100 million, even better. But I'm just going to go on a limb and say it's a 50 million units. Okay, so let's say 50 million units Oculus Quest. That's still pretty good. okay, that they sold that much. That means there is an interest for the VR, and it's still here and it's growing. Now, if you look at the PlayStation VR, for a console, they only sold 5 million units. Now, granted, that's not, big numbers by today's standards, but for Sony, 5 million, it was something that they looked at and they said, well, we really didn't even think that this was going to even evolve or even stay for this many years as we were hoping, that it wouldn't last maybe 2-3 years, but it stayed from 2016 all the way through 2019. So it stayed for quite a while, for about 6 years, something like that. 5 years, 5.5 years, right? So it was around for quite a while. 5 years. I remember in 2021, I was still playing PlayStation VR. I was playing, After the Fall and other games. So I was still playing PlayStation VR. Now, 5 million units might not seem like much, but for Sony, it gave them a hope and a green light that, hey, the VR, there's still hunger for VR. It hasn't matured, but there's still a hunger for the VR, and people are still hungry for their next level virtual reality experience. Just like people are still hungry for 3D, but right now 3D technology, it hasn't evolved where it should be, so it's, people are going to have to stay hungry for that as well. So what I'm trying to say, I understand his point, but I think he's also missing on the point that we can't just say that nobody wants the VR. That's not true. There's a big number of people out there. I would say 100 million people out there. They're the owners of the VR headsets, and they enjoy VR and they use VR. So for him to say that there isn't any interest in VR, it's just kind of immature to say that. Now, if you're looking at it from a market point of view, from a stock market point of view, you're going to say, from a business point of view, yeah, 50 million, still nothing. 50 million units, 5 million units, sure, it's nothing. In order for you to reach that global objective. So let's see what else he's saying. Let's continue.
The Meta Quest 2, or the Oculus Quest 2, has certainly done well for itself, selling almost 15 million units globally and becoming the de facto VR platform for a mainstream audience.
Oh, so it was a 15 million. I'm sorry, it wasn't a 50 million. It was a 15. So, that's still pretty good. That's still pretty good. 15 million units. So I apologize. It wasn't 50 million. It was a 15 million. But that's still pretty good that the Oculus Quest 2 was able to achieve 15 million units and is still growing. Okay, and they got Quest 3 coming out. And who knows how that's going to, evolve. But the bottom line is that shows you that there's a hunger for VR. People are hungry for this VR experience. So I wouldn't go and say that nobody really cares. Now, if you look at it from like a global point of view, majority of gamers, they only care about the graphics, frame rate, and, next generation graphical technology, and that's what they are interested in. Better graphics, higher frame rate. Better graphics, higher frame rate. So the interest, it's always going to be for that. So that's not bad for the Oculus that they sold 15 million, and also not bad for PlayStation VR in 2016 that they sold 5 million units for something that it was a gamble. Like they were gambling. They didn't even know if it's going to be successful. And it turned out to be, in my opinion, an underrated success.
But that's essentially the level of success we're talking about here. The best-selling VR system has sold 15 million. The others, much, much less than that, given that the Meta Quest 2 is the dominant VR platform after all. Sony's own original entry into the VR market was the PSVR, and it sold, actually, fairly well, with 5 million units sold globally. Now, in a vacuum, and in the immediate context of the discussion, those numbers aren't quite so bad, are they? The PSVR sold a third of the dominant VR platform, and selling 5 million of anything is hardly anything to scoff at. But business decisions, especially financial ones, are never made in a vacuum. And in the broader context, the PSVR's performance starts to look less impressive, and raises the question of why a follow-up exists at all. And certainly, why in the state it does. We'll get to this bit shortly.
Well, this guy, again, he keeps bringing that bias against the VR. I mean, he just admitted that that's not bad for a console. For the very first time that a console, Sony, the only console, has the VR technology and the VR headset, and 5 million, he just admitted, that's not bad, considering the counterparts of the Facebook Oculus Quest, only selling 15 million. So right there, he just admitted that's pretty good. But then he says, but why would you move on and then try to move to the next generation of the headset? He was referring to PlayStation VR 2. Well, gee whiz, because it was success. PlayStation VR was successful. And that's why Sony decided to make a PlayStation VR 2. You know, and you just admitted, what's funny about this guy, he just admitted that PlayStation VR was successful. So if they were already successful with the PlayStation VR 1 and they sold 5 million units, so why wouldn't Sony take that gamble and try it again? Second time around. You know. And if it doesn't work out, well, so be it. Maybe they'll make a PlayStation Portable 2. Next generation. But anyway, let's continue.
Just as a reference, the PlayStation 4 sold roughly 115 million units worldwide, meaning that, very literally, less than 1 in 20 of PS4 owners were willing to buy the PSVR. This, by the way, was in spite of heavy discounts, great bundling, and some not insignificant software support. At the peak of the PSVR's life cycle, you could buy one for $200, and it would come bundled with some amazing games, such as Astrobot Rescue Mission, Iron Man, Gran Turismo Sport, and sometimes even multiple games. This was also at the peak of VR hype. You know how I alluded to that period where the entire tech world was convinced that VR would be the next step, and there was a lot of optimism and enthusiasm surrounding the format. PSVR came right at the crest of that wave, and rode it to garner a lot of attention, support, and interest. Remember, major third parties were all announcing some fairly big-name PSVR projects. Remember when every developer or publisher would have at least some VR project, even if not a fully fledged game, planned? And remember how almost all of them hit the PSVR? That was the market the PSVR launched in. Those were the circumstances going in its favour, and with all of that, it managed to sell 5 million units globally. 5 million? That's a pittance. You know what sold more than 5 million? Very literally every other PlayStation platform ever.
All right, so again, the problem with this guy, and it's his bias. Clearly, the guy has the bias against the VR. All right. So one thing I didn't like is the fact that he was comparing, 115 million units of PlayStation 4 being sold out versus a PlayStation VR. First of all, console is a console. A PlayStation, it's a very successful console. So, of course, number 4 in a generation in 2013, PlayStation 4 coming in with the next generation console, number 4, PlayStation 4. Of course, you expect them to sell 115 million units, right? But why compare? This is my problem with this guy. It's like he's backpedaling. He's like looking for a needle in a haystack to find any reason to make his point. Why are you using a PlayStation 4, a console, comparing a console to a VR headset, which is an add-on accessory? Mind you. Why are you comparing an add-on accessory, which that's what a PlayStation VR essentially is? It's an add-on accessory. Why are you using an add-on accessory, PlayStation VR, to compare it to a very successful console trademark PlayStation 4? Of course, PlayStation 4 is going to sell more units. Are you kidding me? Of course. But why compare it to a headset? Well, clearly, we all know why. Because he has a bias. And I told you in the beginning of this video, clearly you can hear the way he started his first segment, 30 seconds in the video. It's certain bias against PlayStation VR, PlayStation VR 2. To me, that's not a healthy journalism. I don't think journalists should have bias. They should look at every and each device for what they are. And they shouldn't compare accessory add-on VR headset to a console. Okay? So right there, clearly I can see that this guy has a bias. Even the way he started his video in first 30 seconds, there was a certain bias against the PlayStation VR. And that's my problem with this guy on this video. So let's continue. Let's see what other bias he's going to think of against the PlayStation VR.
And that isn't an exaggeration. The original PlayStation sold over 100 million, the PS2 sold over 150 million, the PS3 sold over 80 million, the PS5 is already north of 30 million, and the PSP sold over 80 million. Even the PS Vita, the one and only real failure the PlayStation brand has had, is estimated to have sold 13 to 15 million units.
Here we go again. Here we go again. The guy's, again, he's backpedaling back to comparing a PlayStation VR to a console. Why are you comparing it to a console? And then he throws in the portable device, which obviously he loves portable, so he wants to kind of like mock the PlayStation VR technology. Like, look, even the portable has sold more units than your headset. But that's biased. You're not, listen to me, mate. You're not treating this fairly. You're not being fair. Okay? You're comparing apples with oranges, dude. Or you're comparing watermelons with coconuts. Or you're comparing eggs with, I don't know, eggs with nuts. I don't know. like, dude, you have to be more fair. You're not being fair here, dude. And I think that's why a lot of people are hitting dislikes on your video. You're being very biased, dude. Why don't you compare PlayStation VR with the Oculus Quest? Why don't you compare VR headsets with VR headsets? Why are you comparing accessory add-on to a console or to a handheld? I have a big problem with this, mate. I have a big problem with this. You're not being fair. You're being unfair and biased. And people, and I think dislikes they're showing up on the video are showing that that you are totally biased against anything VR regarding PlayStation. So let's move on.
Units worldwide, as in very literally 3 times as much as the PSVR managed. We'll get back to the Vita in a bit, because that, after all, is central to the point that I'm making here. But for a second, let's compare the success of the PSVR to other PlayStation add-ons. The PS Move, for example, sold 15 million units in 2 years. The iToy, 10.5 million units in 5 years. The Pocket Station, which was a Japan-only portable add-on for the PlayStation, sold 5 million units, and that was exclusive to one market. So, even with everything going its way, the PSVR didn't do too well, and that's actually not the platform's fault. The issue appears to be that for the broader public, VR simply is not appealing enough to sell in anything remotely resembling mainstream.
Again, here we go with this guy. Why are you, again, comparing PlayStation Move controllers? They're much cheaper and more accessible add-ons versus something that's $400 of VR technology. Why are you comparing a Move controller with a virtual reality headset? Why are you comparing a iToy camera that's very cheap and accessible to a PlayStation VR add-on accessory headset? This makes no logical sense to me. Like, dude, what are you doing, man? Like, this is just crazy. Well, not crazy, but more like biased crazy. I like to add biased crazy against VR, or specifically PlayStation VR. 5 million, it's pretty darn good for a gamble that Sony took on PlayStation VR. They didn't even think it was going to be even successful. But they took a risk, they took a chance, and guess what? It turned out to be a success. 5 million for them was pretty big success. For the very first time, gambling with the PlayStation VR for the very first time. That's a success. But you're trying to compare something that's fairly new concept that has never been tried before on the Sony PlayStation console. You are trying to compare that to a PlayStation Move controller, to a toy, a handheld toy, or some other device, portable device that was released only in Tokyo, Japan. Like, dude, the problem with this video, you are looking for anything and everything to find an excuse to make you biased with a T at the end. Bias. Point. Is there a T at the end or just the S at the end? Bias. Or biased. Or bias. Whatever. Bias. I don't think there's a T at the end. I don't know. All you grammars out there can correct me on it. But you know what I mean. The guy's being biased against PlayStation VR. Because I know someone's going to say, there is no T at the end. There's just S. Bias. Not biased. Bias. Okay, fine. Duly noted. Let's move on.
Mainstream numbers. So, why then did Sony persist in sticking with this segment at all? Why, after PSVR, and after seeing the state of the broader VR market, did Sony decide to do a PSVR 2? I don't ask this question out of spite, but out of consideration for some very basic and straightforward logistics that Sony themselves admitted to back in 2013 to 14, when the Vita was floundering after being all but abandoned by them. Sony, back then, admitted that supporting 2 platforms was an increasingly difficult endeavour, that maintaining 2 distinct development pipelines with their own distinct set of services and games was challenging in an era of resource-intensive game development. This explanation rang true. It made total sense. As games become more and more time and resource intensive to develop, supporting multiple systems at a time becomes increasingly difficult. And so, Sony wisely made the decision to focus on their core competencies, as well as the market where the bulk of their audience lies, high-end home consoles. It's the exact same problem Nintendo faced in the early 2010s, which led to the infamous struggles of the Wii U and the 3DS, and which led Nintendo to consolidate their own pipeline and platforms into one hybrid system. Once more, we'll get back to the Switch later, but right now the point of bringing it up is Sony's explanation made sense. What didn't make sense is Sony then deciding to split their resources across two distinct platforms and pipelines anyway, because what do you imagine PSVR is exactly? It's its own distinct platform, which requires games to be developed for it specifically. And unlike handheld game development, which is just pared back console development, VR game development is a whole other beast, requiring totally different tech pipelines on the development side and an entirely different set of...
All right, again, the problem I have with this guy, it's here we go, backpedaling him, trying to find that bias excuse to make his biased point. First of all, PlayStation VR 1, mate, my dude, have you even... How many PlayStation VR 1 games do you own, my mate? How many PlayStation VR 1 games have you played, my mate? How many of them have you played? I know how many of them I have played because I own it. I live stream it. I have. As a matter of fact, tonight I'm going to live stream again. People are still playing PlayStation VR 1. They're playing Firewall 0 Hour multiplayer. They're playing After the Fall multiplayer. They're playing constantly on the PlayStation VR. Mate, it seems to me that you never even owned the PlayStation VR. It seems to me that you never even played any of these games. Games like a Farpoint, games like Firewall 0, games like, let me see, Iron Man in VR, games like a Batman VR experience. Dude, there's a huge list. Even Hitman on PlayStation VR. I mean, there's so many PlayStation VR games. Ace Combat, Gran Turismo. I can go down the list. Skyrim. Yes, even people still play Skyrim with a Move controller. So for you to say that it's difficult for Sony to do both platforms, they did. It's 2023. They did. They proved they can do it, and they did. Since 2016, bro. Look at the first-party games they delivered that you can only experience on the PlayStation VR. Farpoint. Where are you going to play Farpoint? You got to have a PlayStation VR. It's only on PlayStation VR. What do you need for Farpoint? You got to have a aim controller. It's exclusive only for that. You can't play it on a PC. You can't play it nowhere else. You can only play it on the PlayStation VR, which I'm going to show it tonight. I mean, I can go down the list of PlayStation VR games, dude. So what exactly are you talking about? Sony has proven that they can do this, and they did. They did it. Bunch of third parties jumped on PlayStation VR, making bunch of PlayStation VR games. But somehow you missed that out on this video. Somehow you didn't include that on this video. Since 2016, my dude, my mate, since 2016, Sony has been delivering on two fronts. On two fronts. PlayStation 4 and PlayStation VR 1. And now, of course, PlayStation 5 and the next generation PlayStation VR 2. And they already got the first party. They got the Horizon for the very first time. Horizon. The Call of the Mountain. The very first generation, first party VR game. What are you talking about? What about supermassive games? You know, A Rush of Blood. And this next one that they have. Switchback. Like, what are you talking about, bro? That's the problem with this video, my mate, is you are looking for bias. You're not being a fair journalist. A fair journalist would say, well, that's not true. I can't bring my bias here. Okay, let's put it this way, mate. If PlayStation VR 1 was such a failure, was such a ridiculous failure, why would they still be making it all of these years? Why would make games like Iron Man and all of these first party games like Blood and Truth and I can think of top of my dude, Farpoint, Bravo Team, Alpha Bravo Team Zulu, whatever. There's another game that's exclusive to from Supermassive Games. Why would they? A Firewall Zero? Dude, the list goes on and on. The list is pretty big. So why would Sony support a failed device? Since 2016, if according to you it was failed, if that it was a failure, according to you it was a failure. If it was such a failure, then why would they be still doing it since 2016? Why would they waste their money on that? They even had Bethesda with a Skyrim. And people still play Skyrim. They still play Skyrim, dude. In VR. And there's a bunch of other PlayStation VR 1 games that are too hot for the North American market in Tokyo, in Japan, in Asia. We cannot bring it here because they're too hot, if you know what I mean. Let's not forget the Asian market and you know, South Asian market, Southeast Asian market, and Japan, right? The amount of those VR games that are out there that never made it to the North America. So what are you talking about, dude? Anyway, let's move on.
Skills and considerations to be done properly. In other words, it's much more difficult to spread your resources across a console and a VR platform than it is to do that across a console and a handheld. If Sony was...
Here we go. He finally has spoken. Yeah, so thank you for telling us that you are biased against the VR and you are a handheld fanboy. Why don't you just come out on this GamingBolt video and just tell us you're a handheld fanboy? But you are clearly just acknowledged right now. You just acknowledged, my mate, my dude, you just acknowledged publicly on this video that you are in fact a PlayStation Portable fanboy. And there's nothing wrong with that. I loved my PSP. I enjoy the hell out of it. But guess what? I don't go around saying that PlayStation VR sucks. I don't go around saying, why does the PlayStation VR exist? I was super happy that it came out in 2016 next to the PlayStation 4 Pro. I was super stoked. But you are so biased and you are so butthurt. You are so butthurt that Sony didn't create a PSP 2, a PlayStation Portable 2 next generation. You are so pissed off that they didn't do that. Instead, they surprised you with the PlayStation VR 2. That's biased. You are biased. I don't even know if I want to finish this video, this 19 minutes, because you're going to be constantly just repeating yourself, saying portable this, portable that. Portable sold more units. Portable's better, easier to, bring the third-party games and first-party games, blah, 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 blah. You're going to keep repeating like a broken record, the same thing over and over and over again, mate. I'm pretty sure you will. How do I know that? Well, because I watched the entire video. Yes, I was able to pull myself. I strapped myself onto a chair and opened my eyes, like Malcolm McDowell in A Clockwork Orange. Mate, I was able to strap myself on the seat, and just watch and endure and survive this ridiculousness of biased or bias, whatever.
Was always going to split resources, why not just stick with the handheld market? Their decision to abandon it does make sense in context of when it was made. This was in the early 2010s. The PS Vita had face-planted spectacularly. Even Nintendo was struggling to get the 3DS to gain traction. And general wisdom at the time was that dedicated game portables were dead, more or less subsumed by the mobile and tablet gaming market. On the other hand, VR was a promising new frontier with the potential for what then appeared to be massive growth, and with its high-tech trappings, potentially very appealing to the audience Sony had cultivated for the PlayStation. Deciding to drop the handheld market in favour of the VR at the time made total and absolute sense. No arguments there at all. But now, when the state of the VR market and the performance of the PSVR itself is on hand and readily referenceable, the decision to double down on VR makes no sense at all. And they're not just doubling down on the VR market.
It makes no sense to you. Hello? Yeah, because you're biased. Of course it's not going to make any sense to you because you don't like it. Because you want the portable. You want the PlayStation Portable, PSP 2. See, you are looking at it made from a selfish point of view. And I don't even know how you can be a journalist. How you even call yourself a journalist, mate. If you are looking at it from a selfish point of view, from a selfish bias point of view, okay? Like for you to say they're doubling down on what? On something that was successful, on something that they didn't even think was going to be successful, which it was. PlayStation VR 1 was successful. It's been around since 2016, mate. That's a lot. That's almost a cycle of a console, if not longer. And for you to say that it's not successful, my question to you, mate, is, have you even double-checked the PlayStation 4 store? Just to see how many PlayStation VR games there are. Please, mate, if you ever see this video, if you come across this video, maybe you will. Maybe you will. My mate, I'm not hating on you. I'm just simply saying to you, go to the PlayStation 4. If you have a PlayStation 4, go to the PlayStation 4 store and go through the list of PlayStation VR games since 2016. How do I know this? Because I own PlayStation VR in October 6th of 2016. I think it was October 6th, 2016. Yes, I remember it like it was yesterday. October 2016. October 6th, 2016. I bought every single game that came out from 2016 all the way through 2019. Okay? And I've been playing PlayStation VR 1 ever since. And I still am. I have it. I got the original box. So I know what I'm talking about. But you, mate, you need to go to the PlayStation 4 VR store. Go to the PlayStation VR store market. And you're going to see how many games PlayStation VR has, from first-party exclusives to third-party, you name it. So go check it out. Even Ace Combat, it's supported on PlayStation VR only. You can't play it on a PC. You can't play it anywhere else except, guess what? PlayStation VR. Yes, if you want that Top Gun Maverick experience on an Ace Combat, you got to have a PlayStation VR. As a matter of fact, when Resident Evil 7 came out, which you just totally forgot. You just totally forgot about Capcom. It was exclusive to PlayStation VR for the entire year when it came out. It was, I believe, 2018. I believe it was January of 2018. It was exclusive only for PlayStation VR for the entire year. And it still plays the best on the PlayStation VR because the experience was built from Capcom entirely for the PlayStation VR experience. But you totally forgot about that. You just totally brushed that aside. See, that's my problem with your point of view. Because it's a very biased point of view. Because you love PlayStation Portable. Hey, I love Handheld. I have Handheld. I have Steam Deck. I have Nintendo Switch OLED. I love my portable stuff. I used to have a PlayStation Portable. I wish that I never traded in. But guess what? I'm not going to say, oh, gee whiz, PlayStation VR was a failure. I'm not going to say PlayStation VR was a failure. Only someone who's biased against the VR would say that. And then the audacity you have to say, why are they making PlayStation VR 2? Oh, gee whiz, I don't know. Why don't you go figure that out? Because PlayStation VR 1 was successful, so it makes total sense for them to make a PlayStation VR 2.
They're doubling down on it while also stripping away a lot of the advantages the PSVR had that helped it find the traction that it did find in the market. The cost of PSVR 2, for example, is eye-wateringly high, with its sticker price.
Okay, fine. This point, okay. I get it. I understand. Your argument here. Fair point, valid point. It's expensive. But what you fail to understand is that we're in a different time zone. We're in a different timeline. We are in 2023. We're not in 2016. All right, so let's just put that in perspective, mate. Again, you keep forgetting PlayStation VR came in the peak, and you even said on your video that it came out in the peak of VR. In the peak of VR, and it did a great job competing with the peak of VR, of other VR headsets. Was able to compete with PC and Oculus. Was able to hold its own ground with 5 million units sold. And you even acknowledged this. This is what you said. You even acknowledged this. And now, you are comparing a 2016 PlayStation VR situation with a 2023 situation. It's a big difference between 2023 and 2016. 2016 economy was great. Everything was running smooth, no issues, no problems. It wasn't the greatest economy of all time, but we were doing pretty good. Okay? There was no, inflation. There was no recession. Things was good. All right? Things were going smooth. So, you got to look at the market, the way the market was back in 2016 versus the market today in 2023. After the terrible pandemic that took millions of lives worldwide, after a terrible pandemic for two years, that screwed up our economy and a lot of different things, and of course politics didn't help that either. But let's not get into that. So you are not taking that consideration, my mate. You're not taking into consideration the situation of the market in 2016 versus the market of 2023. So the market is obviously different. So it costs Sony more money to build these headsets. This is a much better technology than what we had on PlayStation VR 1. You forgot to mention that. This is a state-of-the-art technology. a 4K resolution headset. Go and check out to see how much the 4K VR headsets are on the PC. Just a plain 4K resolution. Go check out and see how much it is. Yeah, go check it out. And also, while you at it, see if they have high dynamic range. See if they have 110 field of view. See if they have 120 hertz refresh rate. And see if they have 4 tracking cameras. See if they have a haptic feedback, adaptive triggers, and all this other technology that's built inside the PlayStation VR 2. Go see if they have that. Okay? Go see if they have that. All right? So, $600, granted, it's not helping Sony reach that global objective, and I don't think they're trying to reach the global objective. I think they're playing it safe to see how the market goes, how the market changes, and then they might cut the price next year or by the end of this year. All right. So, but they had to put this type of a price tag because they can't do it any cheaper. It's costing them more money on the labor in these high inflation times. Okay? So, but you forgot to mention that. You forgot to mention the economy and what happened, pandemic and post-pandemic, and now 2023 versus 2016. And you forgot to mention technology that's built inside the VR headset. You forgot that. Somehow it slipped your mind. But why did it slip your mind? Because it slipped your mind because you love portable gadgets. You love PlayStation Portable, man. You are so biased. Anyway, let's continue. I told you this. Did I tell you? But the video is going to be long, and it is long. And I had to make this video long because there's so much I want to say here.
Price being at least as much as the PS5 itself in most countries, and higher in several. That sticker shock, which comes right as we're reportedly entering one of the biggest economic recessions in years, is already an issue in and of itself. But the PSVR 2 also launches in an era where the VR optimism is dead, and the bulk of the development community has decided to jump off the train.
What? All right, that's it. I cannot watch this anymore. Listen. Bro. On which planet do you live on? Oh, let me guess. You live on the planet portable handheld devices. You are so biased, man. Listen, you don't have to be a brain surgeon. You don't have to be a scientist to realize that this guy is totally biased against the anything VR regarding, period, especially on a Sony VR. So there's no point of me going through this video any further because he's going to keep repeating all these same old points. You know, the economy sucks and too expensive, blah, 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 blah. No one cares about it. No one wants to play it. I was like, dude, I mean, you can be this ignorant. I guess you can. If all you are is a portable handheld fanboy, mate. And that's the only conclusion I can come up with here. This guy on the GamingBolt, it's nothing but some sad handheld portable fanboy. And I don't know why GamingBolt allows such nonsense like this to be even put out there. This is why you have 426 dislikes, my mate. Let's see what the people are saying on the comments. Juan Carlos Alonso says, personally, VR is much more interesting to me than a handheld. And I loved my PSP, but having tried other headsets and looking at the specs and games available at launch, I'm hyped for PlayStation VR 2. Well, there you go. Michael Lucas, I think VR will slowly grow. The reason being that until you try VR, you don't understand how immersive it truly is. Thank you. This is the kind of video that could age like milk. VR has needed Sony to do this since 2016 after the PlayStation VR was released. It's been a while coming, but here it is, and Sony can now take us all forward into next gen VR gaming. Look at these. Listen, I pre-ordered my PlayStation VR 2 back in December. Should be delivered in 2 weeks. I never been more excited for a gaming system. If you want a solid handheld, get a Steam Deck. Sony has a good amount of PlayStation games on Steam. VR is where gaming is going. It's very exciting. Handheld has a lot of competition. Nintendo Switch, which is hard to surpass. Steam Deck, smartphones, exactly. New VR headset is definitely more exciting than a new handheld. Mate, you took an L of bias on this one, big time. Big time. I'm not going to give you a dislike because I'm not going to be that kind of a guy. I'm not that type of a person. But come on, man, you spend 19 minutes just being biased. And even the beginning of the video, you started the video by being biased. Your first 36 seconds, when you click on the video, you can look at the timer. The first 36 seconds was, here, let me give you the so many list of points, of bias points as to why PlayStation VR is a failure and why PlayStation VR 2 is going to fail. Me, I only criticized the what you call it, the head strap. The head strap, that's it. It feels too plasticky, looks too plasticky. That was my only complaint, was the cosmetic. Why did they go with a cheap plastic for $600? That's a legitimate concern. All right, that's a legitimate concern that I had. But make no mistake, I love PlayStation VR. I think I proved that. If you watch my channel, if you do my research on my channel. So, anyway, clearly this guy's biased on this whole thing. And, I mean, just watch the video and it's just repeating the same thing over and over again. Me, I love PlayStation VR. I have it. You've seen me play it. Been playing it since 2016. I am not a PlayStation VR hater. But I did criticize it for a head strap. I'm legitimately concerned about the head strap. So that's a legitimate criticism for something that's a $600. Like, hey, man, I don't want to break this thing. All right. I've just wasted $600. All right. It would totally suck if it breaks. You know, I don't want to tape it and glue it and all that shit, you know. But this guy, it's totally biased. This guy is just all over the place of just being biased. And that's why he has 426 dislikes. Anyway, what do you guys think about this whole GamingBolt video? My opinion, you heard my opinion. You know how I feel. This guy is totally biased. Totally biased. And it just reeks of bias. Even from the beginning of the video, totally biased. All right, guys. Well, there you have it. I'll see you in the live stream. Thank you for watching this long video. I couldn't make it any shorter than 1 hour. It had to be 1 hour because, I mean, there's so much to say. And the guy spent 19 minutes repeating the same thing over and over again. All these bias points, you know, like looking for needles, different colored needles in a haystack. Different colored needles in a haystack. The only difference, the guy's colorblinded and he can't tell which color is which in these needles in the haystack. And it was just painful to watch it. You know, hopefully this analysis of this video gives you a better perspective of what I think about this. And clearly this is a very one-sided bias video. Clearly anybody can see that. People on the comments are saying the same thing. And, you know, these dislikes clearly shows you where it stands. If PlayStation VR was such a failure, if PlayStation VR 2 is going to be a failure, then why are everybody's giving positives points of views? Everyone's saying positive things about it. I haven't heard anybody who came in from San Diego on that PlayStation VR 2 demo and said, oh, gee whiz, this is terrible. oh my God, why did I even bother going to San Diego Sony headquarters to try the PlayStation VR 2? Everyone is coming away with a positive experience. No one has given it a negative experience yet. But according to you, it should have never been made because PlayStation VR 1 was so unsuccessful. Anyway, I can go on and on and on. Thank you guys for watching. Sorry that this is 1 hour, but I hope that you guys will appreciate this video for what it is. It is what it is. I have to call it for what it is, and that's all there is to it. I'll see you guys later. I'll see you in the next video, and I'll see you in the live stream. Take care. Join me in the live stream for some more conversation. Take care. This is only on PlayStation VR 2. Bye-bye.